John Harbaugh's name has never been hotter in the state of Arizona. I'm not a huge fan, but why not talk to the source who can tell me I'm dumb or smart? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Alex Clancy here. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, now part of the #1 sports podcast platform in Locked On. Laundry list of coaching staff or coaches that the Cardinals are going to interview has gotten longer since yesterday. Today, we're going to centralize around one. That is John Harbaugh. And to join me is none other than the host of Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher. Kev, I got ripped through things that are uncomfortable for me, like if it were like a tractor with like glass, like pulling me, things like that after yesterday's show, saying that I'm out on John Harbaugh. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the positives because there are far more positives than negatives. We'll talk about the negatives in the second segment. And if you think it, with your big, beautiful brain, if you think it could actually work in Arizona, chances are he's not even going to look here, but we got to talk about all the different candidates. Today's episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by Crossover Thursday, which are still happening, and those are presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Kevin Oestreicher, 2008 until yesterday, or 2 days ago, John Harbaugh was the head coach. Talk to me about what it was like. Just like overview, good things, what everybody is jealous of with the Baltimore Ravens as a whole, with John Harbaugh taking the lead.
Yeah, I mean, it feels kind of weird. I talked with Q over at Locked On Raiders yesterday on his show, and he said, welcome into the head coaching carousel. And I'm like, thanks. I hate it. I've never been here really ever since covering this team because, Alex, it's crazy to think 18 years because in today's sports landscape, you're lucky to make it 5. Like, it's that type of deal. So, look, all in all, John Harbaugh had a great Ravens tenure. I think a lot of teams would do anything to have the consistent regular season success and the consistent organizational success that the Ravens have had over those 18 seasons. He built a culture. He won a Super Bowl. He had postseason success. And, despite everything that happened towards the end, and, we'll talk about that obviously as the show goes on, of course, this to me wasn't about John Harbaugh not being a good coach or not being someone that can have success at his next stop. It was just about something that got too stale, differences in the organization, and, coaches get hired to get fired. And that's no exception to guys who got hired in 2008. People are having that conversation with Mike Tomlin. They had it with Bill Belichick before he was let go by New England, and that relationship was done. So it was going to come to an end eventually. Seemed like it happened pretty quickly. But there are a lot of good memories to look back on in John Harbaugh's tenure. The Ravens posted a tribute video. That's when it really felt real about going back down memory lane for 18 seasons. I'm like, that's a long time. Like 2008 was a really long time ago. And the Ravens now, they have to get this hire right. But with the way things were going and trending in the disappointing years, I would rather them get the hire wrong than keep going with John Harbaugh and keep being complacent.
We're going to put a pin in that baby here for a second. Yeah. Because that's the thing that thwarts the mind of fans of teams who don't have that. You know what? We're winning too much. Let's get another face in here. Oh, you're not winning Super Bowls, which are very few organizations. I mean, under 10 that could really have that luxury, whether it be, structure up top or money to spend or, the quarterback that they were able to draft who's been with them for a long time. How can you look at multiple, playoff appearances, obviously 13-11 in the playoffs, multiple 10-win seasons, and say, you know what? No. Like, how are things like that? These are the closest thing to champagne problems that NFL organizations have. Like, how can you say no to that at some point? Getting stale. Like, people say that, but nobody's argued. Like, he thought he was going to get fired, what, before they drafted Lamar Jackson around that time? Or it was in the middle, but like, how do you just say no to good because it's not great?
Yeah, to me, I think it's with expectations, right? I think for a lot of teams who are, going through rebuilds or haven't quite like reached the, hey, we can contend every year. Maybe just don't even have elite quarterbacks or elite position players and the roster isn't quite there yet. If you're kind of in that 8-9 category, 9-8 category, or, your wild card exit every single season, I mean, and the expectations aren't, hey, we're going to win a Super Bowl. That usually comes with up and coming teams who have younger quarterbacks, teams who are still trying to figure things out. And so that I understand, like, that's what I mean with Lamar, their first season with Lamar, and you mentioned Harbaugh and, potentially leaving, he was going to get fired in 2018. They had missed the playoffs for 3 straight years. They were 4-5 entering their bye week. Joe Flacco got injured, and so Lamar came in and essentially saved his job. But the expectation going out of that 2018 season was not, okay, the Ravens are going to win a Super Bowl this year. It was, hey, what can they do? So there was still room for growth in time with John Harbaugh there, but you already saw it because, they hadn't won a Super Bowl since 2012. It was 2018. There were already some of these rumblings about, was it the right decision? Bisciotti, their owner, Steve Bisciotti, he considered firing Harbaugh after the 2017 season. But then Lamar has that incredible 2019 year, first full season starting, wins the MVP, and that's when that clock started. It was not, okay, do they still need some more time to figure it out? Or they this up? No, they were there. The target was on their back after that season. And so there was growth and progression. Like, again, my big thing is I just want to see progression. I'm not asking them to win a Super Bowl every season. They don't have to continue to progress every year. When there is consistent regression year to year, that's when it becomes a problem where you're still winning games. You're still making the postseason, but you don't play the games if you're these competitive organizations or organizations that have Super Bowl aspirations to, hang a AFC North championship banner and then losing the wild card round the next weekend. Like, you want to go and make and win the Super Bowl. And to me, I think that standard of excellence in Baltimore had those expectations where they were, not to mention you have an elite quarterback. You have a really good roster with talent around it. And so you want to maximize that window. Lamar Jackson, we're recording this on Thursday. Lamar Jackson turned 29 yesterday. And so he's not 34, but he's also not 24. And you need to maximize that window any way you can. And I'm glad that the Ravens did this because it just felt like the Harbaugh tenure had reached its limit. And sometimes it's just time. It's not about the person. It's not about the coach. It's not about the player. Sometimes it's just time. And I think this is what that was.
Kevin Oestreicher, Locked On Ravens, joining me. The closest thing we've got here at Locked On to the best friend of John Harbaugh. So I figured I'd get him on here. Ozzie Newsome, Eric DeCosta, 2 of the best GMs back-to-back that we've seen in the history of this sport. How much of their ability to stock this pond of Ravens rosters with talent has to do with John Harbaugh not winning more than he did with what he was given?
Yeah, I think that Ozzie and Eric have both built really good rosters, and they both have different approaches, but they both have worked. Ozzie was more of the, we're going to let this ride out. We're going to just kind of rock with what we have over the course of a year and, very minimal year-long changes. Just kind of felt like the roster they went into the season with was the roster they largely had. But Eric DeCosta is much more of a, if it's not working, you're gone. Like, you're out of here. And so there are a lot more midseason trades, a lot more acquisitions, a lot more guys getting cut, and both have worked. But I think that the way that the rosters have looked, I mean, that 2019 roster was not expected to do what it did. There were still certainly a lot of flaws on that roster. So, I give Harbaugh, even though I don't give him a pass for what happened and the way that it happened, the roster wasn't quite where it needed to be despite it overachieving. They still needed more wide receiver help from Lamar Jackson and a couple of other things. 2023, I think, was the best roster this team has had. And, that was a huge disappointment. That was one of the best defenses of all time. The offense was awesome. Like, that to me, you bring in Zay Flowers as a rookie who has a great year. You have the pieces. 2024, still a really good roster. They lost some guys, but Eric DeCosta was able to bounce back from that. Right. Made a lot of good signings, but the thing that made 2023 so good was he hit on almost every free agent acquisition he made. I mean, it was Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy coming up off his couch in week 3, and it was almost every single guy, not every guy, but almost every single guy was a home run. But in 2025, and this is why I don't like to blame everything on one coach or player or executive or whatnot, because it's a whole team effort.
Sure,
Eric DeCosta built a really good roster this year, but there were a couple of fatal flaws that I had talked about before the season started. They were like, if this doesn't go right, it's not going to go well for the team this year. It was offensive line and it was pass rush. The Ravens handed out jobs to guys that didn't earn them on the O-line, and they were terrible. They didn't have their leading sack guy on the year had 4 sacks through 17 games. I mean, you can't have that as a competitive team. And so I think that for Harbaugh this year, there were more roster challenges than in the past, but at the same time, Harbaugh didn't do a lot to adapt to them, where there weren't a lot of options for Harbaugh on the O-line. But at the same time, he didn't go through his options. I mean, he kind of just rocked with what he had with Daniel Falele and Andrew Voorhees instead of giving Emory Jones a shot. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with the complacency. I would rather you make a change and be wrong than keep going back to the well that has not been working over and over and over again. And so we saw that a little bit with Harbaugh. He's very much I'm going to go down with the ship because I think my decisions are right type of guy. At least that's what he's, become a little bit here. And again, he's a very decorated, respected head coach. He's earned the opportunity to make his decisions and do it his way. But you see, this season, it can backfire on you. And I think for a guy that, according to reports, felt like he was going to be back, felt like he was able to just kind of run things and do things what he wanted to do, I think it was a shock to him that when he apparently proposed, hey, I want to run it back and do this stuff, Steve Bisciotti was like, no, I don't agree with you. You're out of here.
Well, sounds like Jonathan Gannon, too, in a completely different light without the expectation of coming back after almost 2 decades. Kevin Oestreicher joining me here, Alex Clancy, Locked on Cardinals. We're going to talk about the negatives from John Harbaugh. We started pivoting that way. My biggest question that I discussed yesterday, I'm going to ask to Kevin, and this is where he's going to tell me either I'm right or wrong, and it's going to be good either way. We'll discuss it next. Today's episode of Locked on Cardinals is brought to you by Rocket Money. I use Rocket Money. I'm looking at the app right now on my phone. And let's be real. Managing your finances can be overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep coming in, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. The automatic transaction categorization is a game changer. I can finally see exactly where my money's going each month. It just categorizes it for you, different colors, and it shows you, subscriptions, bills, food, extraneous, whatever it is. It's got you covered, and it dumbs it down even for a dummy like me to be able to understand. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNFL. That's rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNFL. rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNFL. Today's episode of Locked on Cardinals is also brought to you by FanDuel. I don't know if you guys know this, but the wild card round is here, and FanDuel's officially in playoff mode. Every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel's giving customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. So what you do is you open up the profit boost pack, and you can put a boost on a bet you're already going to make. And all playoffs long, every NFL playoff game day, you're able to do this with FanDuel. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. All right, Kev. You said, paraphrasing, in the first segment, you're not upset that John Harbaugh is not going to be the head coach next season. Because of what you just laid out, I think adds a little context into that. Is there a fatal flaw aside from going down with the ship and not adjusting that could be some either character or coaching flaw that other teams should be looking out for during this process?
Yeah, it kind of felt like the message was growing stale for John Harbaugh, and while it was never direct player confirmation about that, we've heard some reports, from me and Rappaport, that John Harbaugh had lost the locker room. And again, in Baltimore, there are so many differing stories about what actually happened, what went down. There are accounts close to Lamar Jackson that's refuting things, Adam Schefter and Rappaport, and the source off right now. There is so much that's going on with the situation. But, I mean, even just looking from the outside in, you could tell something was off. And John Harbaugh has predicated himself on again, consistent regular season success, knowing that, that's a John Harbaugh led team. That team's going to at least be in the playoffs fighting for the chance to go to a Super Bowl. The other thing was that he was a culture builder, right? He built up a culture, and early in John Harbaugh's tenure, he entered a team with a lot of strong personalities. Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs. And it was a struggle early on for him to kind of establish himself where he wanted to do things his way and the players didn't want to do things that way. And there have been many different reports and stories about how it took a while for John Harbaugh to really shape himself into the coach he is, which is more of a player's coach, a guy that players want to play for, a guy that you want to go to battle for every single week, a guy that's going to have your back. But this season, it just felt like there was more of a disconnect with the locker room, and whether that was about Harbaugh, whether that was about Todd Monken, there's still a lot of unknowns about it. But when you lose both of those things this season, if you're John Harbaugh, where there was not regular season success, and there was not a culture that felt like it was strong this year. The Ravens have had 2 very drama-filled years back-to-back. Playing time disputes, guys getting cut, other random weird things happening. It hasn't felt very Baltimore Raven-like, where, you look at the Ravens organization and, a lot of people say, hey, that's one of the best run organizations in the league. That's a no drama type deal. There's not a lot going on there for the most part, but it didn't feel that way. And so a big clip that I pointed to at the end of the John Harbaugh era, it was actually after the Pittsburgh game, I looked back on what John Harbaugh said before the season. He went on the Ravens official podcast, the team podcast, and in regards to the Super Bowl or bust mentality that, I think a lot of people here knew that Baltimore had Super Bowl aspirations. There were a lot of team Super Bowl picks this year, at least to make it out of the AFC. John Harbaugh called the Super Bowl or bust mentality garbage and phony. And that in itself is just like a mindset that when you have a generational quarterback, when you have the standard and expectation the Ravens have, when you have a roster the Ravens have, when you've had the history the Ravens have had, you need to have every single year be a Super Bowl or bust for this team when you have the roster and have the quarterback and have the talent in place. And it just, again, felt like he was very nonchalant and it felt like he felt comfy. It felt like he was comfy in his role. And, there are a lot of conversations about other coaches. Like, does Mike Tomlin feel that way? Do a couple of other longer tenured coaches feel that way? So for Harbaugh, the big thing that people look at now with him is he's not an offensive or defensive specialist. He came in as a special teams guy.
Right.
And I'm fine with delegators. Like, I'm okay. Like, that's what Harbaugh was. He would hire his coordinators. Those guys would call the plays. Those guys would do their things. Harbaugh would be in the meetings and everything. But it felt like at times he didn't understand he was the head coach of the team. Where, in week 16, I'm sure Alex, Patriots, Ravens, Derrick Henry, not used on those final 2 drives after dominating for 55 minutes.
And then Pittsburgh too.
Yes, it's that type of thing where the personnel decisions were weird, some of the play calling. And again, like play calling, John Harbaugh's not the one calling the plays. But you can't tell me John Harbaugh's not in on the final game day decisions and final game plan decisions. And it just felt like there were lack of adjustments. And again, it's not all on Harbaugh. Like, the coordinators also bear that blame because they're a big part of it. But it just felt like to me as we got further and further and the fourth quarter collapses kept coming and the weird playoff losses kept coming. Like, we can say this, Alex. John Harbaugh was not the one that fumbled at the goal line in the AFC Championship game. He was not the one that dropped the 2-point conversion pass to tie the game against Buffalo last year. He was not the one that missed the kick this year in Pittsburgh. But we've seen a lot of sloppy play from Baltimore. And Harbaugh admitted it. Like, it's on him to have his guys ready to play. And it felt like too many times over the course of the last couple of years, he did not. So, I know I'm saying a lot of like, this is what John Harbaugh is, but there are a lot of positives with him as well. Yeah. Like, again, this is a guy that a lot of people want to go to war for every single week. And he's established that over the course of his career. But, no one's a perfect head coaching candidate, and that includes John Harbaugh.
And you answered the question I was about to ask you tangentially, which is great. So he's had a nice list of coordinators on both sides of the ball. He's a special teams guy, as you mentioned. Okay, he didn't come from one side of the ball. The other came from special teams, which is great in its own right. But as a head coach, it's like, well, the offense is struggling, let me jump in. The defense is struggling, let me jump in. He didn't come from either side of that, and obviously he's been around football for a long time. Gary Kubiak, Wink Martindale, Dean Pease years ago. Like, he's had, McDonald and then Greg Roman and stuff. Like, he's had a lot of great coordinators that he's hired and that I'm sure he's mentored in some capacity, the younger ones. But how much of it is that like a GM job and not a head coach job where it's like, okay, you're a coach, you still have to coach. You don't just bring in coordinators, let them do their thing and hang them out to dry.
Right. I think that Harbaugh can't, again, I think he can be a successful coach somewhere else. But I think that to me, if you're a delegator, you have to do it properly. And, you know, when there is an organization like the Ravens who has that history and who's been very successful, I mean, look, winning cures a lot of things. In fact, I think winning cures everything. And so when you're winning consistently and when you have that, everything's going great. But then as we saw this season, when the losing starts and maybe the talent isn't there and guys are banged up or something's going on, all of a sudden, like it becomes a lot of, okay, can this guy handle it? And so I see a lot of people talking about John Harbaugh in New York. What if the Giants lose a bunch of games with Harbaugh and the New York media comes out in full force? Is Harbaugh going to be able to handle that? Like, again, it comes down to like specific organization. You know, Lamar, he came into Baltimore in 2018. He did his thing. But before that, for years and years and years, it was Joe Flacco. You know, John Harbaugh and Joe Flacco came in together. So if John Harbaugh came in, obviously the Cardinals quarterback situation, what are they going to do with Kyler Murray? Who's the future at that position? Like, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered there. And I think that John Harbaugh, he can bring over a lot of guys from Baltimore that I think can accelerate a franchise like the Cardinals and get them back to a position to win. But is he going to be so stuck in his way again that, you know, is he going to have like, again, a stake in the GM? Like, you know, because again, Osafor's not going anywhere. So like, you know, if he's a guy, we saw this with like Liam Cohen in Tampa last year, where it's like, are the Jaguars going to make a change like they did with Balky to bring in a guy because this guy wants it? And is this head coach good enough to make all these changes for? That, to me, becomes the question for organizations like the Cardinals. So I think it could work in Arizona. I truly do. But it seems to me, as we get all these interviews from John Harbaugh, as the days and weeks go on, will Arizona be on that list? I'm not so sure. But at the end of the day, I think that it wouldn't be a bad thing if John Harbaugh went to Arizona. I just think that it's a risk for any team to take based off of some of the trends that we've seen in recent seasons.
Tell them where they can find you, Kev.
Over at Locked On Ravens, 5 days a week, just like on Locked On Cardinals. So if you want more on John Harbaugh, we'll be talking about it a lot. If John Harbaugh gets hired by the Cardinals, we'll be talking about it over on Locked On Ravens or wherever he gets hired. But appreciate you having me, man.
Hell yeah. I will talk more about what I thought Kevin said, and the majority of it was right. We'll discuss it next. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. The draft pick positions are set, and so many teams are looking for their franchise quarterback. You ever wish that you were a pro NFL quarterback getting drafted first overall by the Arizona Cardinals? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate Football GM, Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into cleats of the number one draft pick quarterback. It's your job to lead your team to greatness to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the number one quarterback career mode game on mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. Sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry, evolve your teammates, give input to your GM roster moves, like everything. You play the game in 2D, offline, so it allows you to do it whenever the hell you want. Just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. We've got something special just for you guys. Use the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB Football Legend, QB1. It's your legacy, man. All right. That was great stuff by Kevin Oestreicher from Locked On Ravens. You know, he said some really interesting things. I was surprised that he didn't say he's happy that John Harbaugh won't be there next year, but I think the difficult part to really try to wrap your head around is there was so much winning there as of late, and it's not something that we've experienced here in the desert. So it's like, well, is good enough? And I guess, you know, winning organizations see it as not such. And then, you know, the thing that he mentioned about the trifecta of player actions that now directly affect John Harbaugh, with the Zay Flowers fumble on the goal line and Mark Andrews dropping the 2-point conversion and Tyler Loop missing the kick last week. It's like, it's more of a body of work thing. If I didn't realize how, you know, down with the ship, this is how things are going to be. He was and not able to adjust as much as some other coaches, which was interesting that Kevin said. But yeah, I mean, this is not a teardown piece on John Harbaugh. I mean, he's one of the best coaches in NFL history. And nobody's denying that. My only pushback, and this may be just because I'm jaded with this organization, is like, there's no shell. There's no armor for a head coach here. It's not, there's years of winning, free agents will come here. It's not, the drafting is going to be incredible and, all of these things. And Monty Osborne's done it, but, like, they've drafted so well in Baltimore. It's hard to compare that to really any organization over the years. So it's like, can you come in without a wetsuit, however many cliches I'm going to use, however many metaphors I'm going to use, and that's my biggest pushback. Would John Harbaugh help this team? Sure. I don't think anybody's denying that. I'm scared that there's not going to be enough support here for him to be able to do as well as he did when he did have all that support with player personnel, coordinators, management, ownership, etc. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.